Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something really fascinating, Urartian pottery and these incredible dynamic motifs you find on them.
That's right. We're looking at the Urartian Kingdom. Geographically, think eastern Anatolia, with influence stretching into Iran, around Lake Van in Turkey today, and Armenia. And temporally, roughly 8th down to the 6th centuries BCE.
And the Urartians, they were quite something, weren't they? Known for, well, their military prowess, amazing engineering, a distinct culture, strong economy too. I always think of those huge forts they built.
Absolutely, a very organized, powerful state. And that sophistication, you really see it reflected in their material culture, which brings us right to the pottery and these motifs. So our goal today is to explore how these designs, the ones showing movement, might shed light on their history, their culture, maybe even their way of thinking.
Dynamic motifs. Okay, let's break that down. So we're not just talking standard patterns or static pictures here.
No, not really. Imagine pottery designs that actually convey action. Like, you might see animals depicted in what look like successive stages of motion. It's not just one still image of a deer. Maybe it's that deer shown with its legs moving, suggesting, a jump or running.
Almost like catching a few frames of movement on the single pot.
Exactly like that. And these moving images, they're often part of a bigger picture, mixed in with geometric designs, scenes maybe showing farming or hunting, perhaps.
So why is this particular feature, this movement, why is it getting our attention today? What's the big deal about these ancient action shots?
Well, what's really compelling, I think, is what it suggests about how Urartians understood and represented motion itself and maybe even narrative. It points towards a really early kind of artistic thinking, moving beyond just static representation. It feels, well, culturally sophisticated. Thousands of years before movies, these artisans were grappling with how to show change over time visually. That's a core idea behind animation, right? It's more than just decoration. It could be the dawn of telling stories through movement.
Right, okay, so early animation attempts on pottery. Fascinating. But what was happening around them? What was their world like, their interactions?
Yeah, connecting it outwards, the Urartian Kingdom was in a really strategic spot, a real crossroads for cultural exchange. You had the Assyrians nearby, the Hittites before them, and later influences that fed into Persian culture.
Okay, so with neighbors like that and potential influences, how do we know what's uniquely Urartian here? How do they make it their own rather than just, copying?
That is a great question. And yes, you can definitely see possible links. Some geometric stuff might echo Hittite styles, maybe some animal portrayals hint at Assyrian art. But the Urartians didn't just copy-paste. They seemed to absorb these things and then develop their own very distinct visual language, especially with this focus on dynamism, on movement.
And did this unique style, this focus on movement, carry deeper meanings? Did it tell us anything about their beliefs, their society?
That's where it gets really intriguing. These dynamic motifs, they could offer clues about Urartian religion and social life. All the animals, the nature scenes, perhaps, that shows a strong spiritual tie to the environment. And the geometric patterns, maybe they represent an emphasis on order, harmony in their society.
So maybe a specific animal shown running fast could symbolize a particular god or a quality they valued.
That's definitely a possibility, yeah. And some scholars suggest certain motifs might have been used in rituals, maybe during festivals or ceremonies. Think about it, repeating patterns of movement could even relate to cycles in nature, like the seasons changing.
So looking closely at these pots, we're not just admiring ancient craftsmanship. We could actually be decoding parts of their worldview, their values, even how they worshipped.
Exactly. Studying these details helps us piece together their understanding of the world and the role art played in it all.
Okay, now this is the part that really grabbed me. This potential link to the origins of animation. How does ancient pottery connect to something we think of as so modern?
Well, the key thing is, they weren't just showing scenes, they seem to be actively trying to depict the process of movement. When you see those sequences, like a lion maybe shown in a few different pouncing positions, that's a basic way to illustrate motion, capturing distinct moments within one continuous action. It shows this abstract thinking about time and sequence that's really pretty advanced for the era. It wasn't just a lion, it was a lion moving.
Almost like the very first storyboards, breaking down an action into visual steps.
You could sort of think of it that way, yes. It suggests the Urartians were playing with ways to visually show how an event unfolds over time. And this is thousands of years before what we normally think of as animation techniques, so it could be a really foundational step in how that whole art form developed.
Wow. That's quite a thought, that looking at these artifacts, we might be seeing the absolute earliest sparks of something that eventually leads to, well, cartoons and CGI.
It definitely opens up some fascinating questions about, the cognitive side of things. How did people back then even think about breaking down movement visually to convey motion? Looking at these motifs helps us trace that really long history of visual storytelling.
It really does make you wonder about the minds that first came up with this way of seeing and drawing.
It does, and it kind of highlights how basic that human urge is to capture stories visually.
So these dynamic motifs, they weren't just a short-lived artistic trend for the Urartians. They were more significant than that.
Oh, absolutely not just a fad. They are incredibly important for understanding their culture, their beliefs, their economy, their art across that whole period, 9th to 6th centuries BCE.
And it wasn't just pottery where these turn up, right?
That's really important, yes. You find similar motifs, these animals moving, the geometric designs, narrative-like scenes on their metalwork too, on inscriptions, even worked into their architecture. It seems to have been a really widespread visual language for them.
So they weren't just pretty pictures. They were actually communicating something, functioning almost like records.
Exactly. They act as really valuable historical documents, helping us fill in blanks in our knowledge. By analyzing these details, scholars can reconstruct bits about their religion, maybe political ideas like certain animals symbolizing royal power and their economy, and how they interacted with their neighbors.
It's amazing how much meaning can be packed into what looks like a simple drawing on a pot.
It really is. They're much more than just decoration. They're a genuine window into the Urartian world.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things we should take away about Urartian pottery and these dynamic motifs?
I think the key points are Urartian pottery with these unique dynamic designs gives us a really special way to understand their culture. These depictions of movement, maybe even sequential stories, could actually be some of the earliest forms of visual narrative we know of, and potentially a very distant ancestor of animation.
And they're more than just art. They're crucial clues for understanding so many aspects of Urartian life beliefs, politics, trade, everything.
Precisely. They're a fundamental tool for appreciating this really fascinating ancient civilization.
Well, this has been incredibly interesting. It's quite something to think that what looks like ancient art could hold the tiny seeds of modern storytelling techniques.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About how that basic human need to capture movement, to tell stories visually, shows up across so many different ancient cultures. And it leaves you with a big question, perhaps. What do these very early experiments in visual narrative tell us about just how powerful and enduring storytelling really is?